Do you know what? There's no place on God's earth more exciting than the church of the living God when God is brooding there, and there's no place on God's earth more boring when He isn't there. How long do you think God's going to put up with our iniquity, our sin? In England and America, we've had the greatest revivals in history. We produced the greatest teachers of the Word of God in history. We've launched the greatest revivals in history. There's never been a revival that superseded the Methodist revival. John Wesley's heart was strangely warmed at 8:45 on the 24th of May, 1738. And immediately God dropped a life coal in the heart of that man. He changed the character of the world. I reminded you last night that Wesley preached 600 sermons in a row, and only 6 of them inside of churches. We raise our hat to him now. They raised their boot to him in the day he lived. Finds a place in history as one of the greatest of theologians and hymn writers. He established schools and colleges. Through the Methodist revival, there was a purging, cleansing flame went throughout the world. You could say the same about Finney in your revivals here in America. I don't think America ever has had a preacher like Finney. I sometimes said to preachers, they don't like me for it. But I never set out to be liked. The Lord never told me I had to be liked. But I told the preachers sometimes that I think evangelists are about the most stupid people in the world. They want to break up the fallow ground and sow the seed and water it and reap a harvest in 20 minutes. Nobody else expects to do that but a preacher. Finney preached 28 nights in a row and never made an altar call. He didn't preach God's love, he preached the wrath of God. He didn't say you're a nice little person, God loves you, but He hates your sin. He says, God is angry with the wicked every day. He didn't preach love, He preached judgment. He didn't preach mercy, He preached judgment. He didn't preach God's love, He preached God's wrath. He didn't preach heaven, He preached hell. He didn't preach grace, He preached law. Night after night He pummeled those people, and they listened until they were in a state of almost mental exhaustion, and finally the fire of God would break out. Remember, he went to a city like Rochester, New York, and had a crusade there for about 2 months and left 100,000 people genuinely born again of the Spirit of God. That changed the character of that city. And as I reminded you yesterday, a true revival, I don't care how many people come to the altar or how much you give the evangelist. If it doesn't change the moral atmosphere of the community, it's not revival. It may be evangelism. Revival is the work of the Spirit of God in the church. Evangelism is the work of the church in the world. I've said this many times. My dear wife will tell you that if God laid all the gifts of the Spirit out, and there are about 17, not 9, all the gifts, including ministry gifts, of the apostle and the teacher and the evangelist and the prophet. God said, Ravenhill, you can have any one of these, but only one. And He said, you can have that ministry of prayer. There'll be nothing public about it. I choose that ministry. You see, when we talk about prayer, we talk about a young man who really killed himself praying. David Brainerd died at the age of 28. Prayed sometimes in kneeling in the snow when the snow was up to his chin, he said, and he could only reach it with the tips of his finger at the end of the day when he'd wrestled for 10 hours in prayer. And he had a tubercular disease, and when he sneezed, he sprayed the snow with the blood that came off his lungs. And if you thought that was a petal from a rose and you took it and stretched it, it would stretch like that, a piece of his lungs. He literally prayed himself to death. Payson of Portland, the man who didn't have wall-to-wall carpeting in his bedroom, he had a hardwood floor like this, and after he died they found that floor had grooves in it, 2 grooves at the side of his bed, long grooves. And as they washed his body to bury him, they discovered he'd big hoofs on his knees, and somebody put 1 and 1 together and said this is where he used to pray. And he used to pray interceding this way until he wore the very grooves in the floor of his bedroom. Oh, I could give you the list of a lot of men in history. I have a lot of books on my shelves of men that soaked themselves in prayer, men that used to spend days and nights and wrestling in prayer and tying up principalities and powers. I often say my prayers, but do I ever pray? Prayer is so simple a child can do it. Prayer is so profound that the greatest prayers in the Bible had no language at all. It will exhaust your vocabulary, it will exhaust you. I'll tell you, when God speaks, something happens. God, I've got everything I wanted as a young man, a packed church, plenty of money, prestige, everybody likes me. But somehow the atmosphere isn't instinct with deity. You don't brood in the sanctuary. He says, I grabbed my pen and he said he began to write a hymn, I think one of the loveliest hymns we have. Do you know what he wrote? He never altered it after he wrote it. This is what he wrote: breathe on me, breath of God. Fill me with life anew, that I may love what thou wouldst love and do what thou wouldst do. Breathe on me, breath of God, till I am wholly thine, till all this earthly part of me glows with thy fire divine. 52 times in the Acts of the Apostles the Holy Ghost is mentioned. 40 times prayer is mentioned. Because if your life ever gets touched with the Holy Ghost, one proof that you're filled with the Spirit of God is this, according to Jude: praying in the Holy Ghost. And he began to analyze it. He says, this is the norm of Christianity. After all, God never designed any backsliding for his church. This is the norm of Christianity. This is the church before it became rich and short of breath by prosperity. This is the church of Jesus before it became muscle-bound by over-organization. And this is the church where people did not sign articles of faith, they acted in faith. This is the church where people did not say prayers, they prayed in the Holy Ghost. This is the place where they didn't gather together the intellectuals to study psychosomatic medicine, they healed the sick. If I were to say to you tonight, do you really seriously think that number one need, number one priority here in America tonight is real Holy Ghost revival? Not this false stuff that's going around now, not this which is the imitation of that which is really to come. Because when God comes, he isn't going to just touch a few charismatic people. When God comes, he'll shake this nation from centre to circumference like a terrier shakes a rat. While the church is looking for better methods and better machinery and more money and more of this and the other, God is looking for better men. That's all he's looking for.